I thought I was just helping my mom for a night. I didn't know she was never planning to come back. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Reese. I'm 23, and I never thought my own mom would betray me like this. It started one Thursday evening when my mom, Carla, called me crying. She said she needed to go on a short work trip and begged me to watch my little brother, Landon, and sister, Mara, for just one night. She sounded desperate, and even though I had work the next morning, I agreed. She dropped them off with a quick hug, thanked me, and said she'd be back by morning. That morning came and went. No call, no text. I tried to reach her, but her phone went straight to voicemail. I told myself maybe she lost signal or was just busy. But then another day passed, then 3. I started to panic. My fridge was running empty, I was missing work, and the kids were starting to ask questions I didn't know how to answer. Where's Mom? Did she forget us? I didn't have the heart to tell them. I was beginning to think so too. By the 5th day, I knew something wasn't right. I called her friends, her job, even a few distant relatives. No one knew anything. One of her old friends mentioned she'd seen Mom with a man named Todd, someone she'd been dating in secret. My heart dropped. That night, while trying to put the kids to bed, I went into her room to find some paperwork, maybe a clue. I found an envelope in her drawer labeled Do Not Touch. Inside were printed emails. She had been planning to move to Florida with Todd and start fresh, leaving her kids behind. I sat on the floor crying, feeling stupid for believing she'd changed. Growing up, she had always used guilt to control me. I thought things were getting better, but I was wrong. When I finally stopped crying, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let her destroy me again. I called Child Services, explained everything, and asked how I could protect Landon and Mara legally. They helped me file for temporary guardianship. A week later, Mom finally called. Her voice was calm, almost fake sweet. She said things had gotten complicated, and she'd be back soon. I told her what I'd done, that the kids were safe with me and the authorities were aware. She exploded, calling me ungrateful, a traitor. But I stayed calm and told her the truth. You left us, Mom. You don't get to be the victim now. Months passed. I found a better job, kept the kids in school, and we slowly built a new routine. Sometimes Mara calls me Mom by accident, and I don't correct her. I'm proud of the life we're building. My mom tried to break me, but instead, she gave me the strength to become someone better. I realized that revenge isn't always about getting even. It's about living well after the storm. After years of trying to stand on her own, Reese was finally starting to feel like her life made sense again. She had rented a small but cozy apartment on the edge of town, a place that actually felt like hers. The walls were bare, but they were peaceful. For the first time, she didn't have her mother's voice echoing through every decision she made. She had a steady job at a local bookstore, a manager who respected her, and a small circle of friends who didn't judge her for her complicated past. She was learning to breathe without permission. But that sense of calm didn't last long. One evening, as she was making dinner after a long shift, her phone lit up. The name on the screen made her chest tighten, Carla. Her mom's calls were unpredictable, always filled with emotion, and usually ended with Reese feeling like a bad daughter. She hesitated for a moment before answering, already sensing it wasn't going to be good news. Carla's voice came through shaky and dramatic. She said she was dealing with something urgent, a sudden trip she couldn't avoid. Her tone was heavy, almost pleading, as she explained she just needed Reese to watch Landon and Mara for one night. There was always that guilt woven into her words, that sharp reminder of all the times she'd claimed Reese owed her. Even now, after years of distance, those old feelings still worked. Reese wanted to say no. She had early shifts that week, and she had worked so hard to build a routine that didn't revolve around her mother's chaos. But hearing Carla cry broke down her walls. She could picture her little brother's tired eyes, her sister's quiet voice asking where Mom was. Family, no matter how messy, still mattered. That thought alone was enough to make her agree. She promised herself it was just one night. She would take the kids, let them sleep over, and drop them off the next morning. It wasn't a big deal. She'd done harder things before. As she hung up, though, a strange heaviness filled the room. Something about Carla's tone didn't sit right, but Reese pushed it aside. She told herself she was overthinking, that her mom wouldn't lie about something like that. Night, she made up the couch with clean blankets and set out some snacks, thinking about how much the kids had grown since she last saw them. It felt bittersweet, the kind of love that still hurt if she looked at it too long. She told herself this would be a small way to reconnect, maybe even start fixing what had been broken between her and her family. Reese didn't know it yet, but that one small decision, the one that came from guilt, from hope, from love, would change everything. It was the quiet moment before the storm, and she had no idea how hard it was about to hit. The next morning, Reese woke early and made breakfast for the kids. She sent her mom a quick message asking when she'd be back. Minutes passed, then hours, with no response. She called once, twice, and then stopped herself from trying again. Maybe Carla was busy, maybe she'd call later. But by the end of that day, the silence felt heavy. When the second day came, that uneasy feeling grew stronger. The kids kept asking if Mom had said anything, and Reese kept giving gentle answers she didn't believe. She told them their mom was probably just delayed. Maybe her trip took longer than planned. Deep down, though, she felt something wasn't right. Her job started to slip away from her fingers. She'd already missed 2 shifts, and her boss left a voicemail saying they couldn't keep holding her spot. The little savings she had were draining fast. The kitchen shelves were nearly bare, and she had to get creative with what was left. Pasta one night, cereal the next. She tried to make everything feel normal for Landon and Mara, but the worry in their eyes mirrored her own. By the 3rd morning, she couldn't stand the waiting anymore. She started calling anyone who might know something, her mom's co-workers, an old neighbor, even her aunt who hadn't spoken to Carla in years. Every answer was the same. No one knew where she was. The last time anyone had seen her, she'd been talking excitedly about a fresh start. Reese's hands shook as she tried her mom's phone again. Straight to voicemail. She stared at the screen, reading the words "call failed" over and over until they blurred. Her chest felt tight, the kind of tightness that comes from realizing someone you love might not love you the same way. Later that evening, she decided to stop pretending. She gathered the kids on the couch, turned off the TV, and spoke softly. "I don't know where Mom is," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Mara's eyes filled with tears, and Landon just looked down at his hand. Reese wanted to promise everything would be fine, but the words wouldn't come. When she finally got through to one of her mom's friends, the woman sounded casual, almost annoyed. "Oh, Carla? I think she went somewhere with that guy, Todd. Probably a little getaway. You know her." Reese hung up without answering. A getaway, while her kids were waiting for her at home. As night settled, Reese sat in the quiet apartment listening to the soft sound of her siblings breathing in their sleep. The room was dark except for the faint glow from the streetlight outside. She stared at the ceiling, trying to make sense of it all. The worry that had filled her chest was turning into something sharper. For the first time, she wasn't just scared, she was angry. Days kept blending into one another, and Reese felt the walls closing in. Envelopes started showing up at her door, rent reminders, utility notices, and the electric bill she hadn't been able to pay. Each one felt heavier than the last. She tried stretching what little money she had, but there was never enough. Every dollar went toward keeping the kids fed and the lights on. Sleep became a luxury she couldn't afford. Her phone buzzed one afternoon. It was her boss, reminding her that her absence couldn't continue. The voice on the other end was polite but firm. If she didn't come back soon, they'd have to replace her. Reese promised she'd return the next day, though she knew it was a lie. She couldn't leave Landon and Mara alone, not when their faces looked so lost every time the phone stayed silent. The apartment grew colder. She kept the heater off to save on the bill, wrapping the kids in old blankets at night. Landon tried to act brave, saying he was fine, but she caught him watching the door more than once. Mara clung to her favorite stuffed bear and kept whispering, "Mom will come back soon, right?" Reese didn't answer. She didn't know what to say anymore. She searched every corner of the apartment for something, anything, that might help. No hidden cash, no note, not even a grocery list left behind. It was as if her mother had walked out of their lives without looking back. The fridge was nearly empty, and Reese started skipping meals to make sure the kids had enough. Her hands trembled each time she checked her bank balance, the numbers shrinking faster than she could think. The pressure built until it felt like a weight pressing on her chest. Late one night, when the kids were asleep, she sat at the kitchen table and stared at the stack of bills spread before. The silence was thick, broken only by the hum of the old refrigerator. Every thought circled back to the same cruel truth. Her mom hadn't just left them, she'd left them with nothing. No plan, no warning, not even a chance. It hit her then that this wasn't an accident. It wasn't some misunderstanding or bad luck. This was deliberate. Her mom had walked away, knowing exactly what she was leaving behind. The realization stung deeper than any argument or harsh word ever had. Reese had been tricked again, pulled back into her mother's chaos just when she thought she'd escaped it. Tears burned in her eyes, but she wiped them away before they could fall. There was no time for breaking down. The kids were depending on her now, and if her mom had abandoned them, she'd have to become the person who didn't. Still, a quiet voice inside whispered what she didn't want to admit. This betrayal felt final. For the first time, Reese began to see her mother for who she really was. It was late when Reese finally gathered the courage to go into her mother's room. The kids were asleep, their soft breathing the only sound in the apartment. She told herself she was just looking for answers, something, anything that could explain the silence. The air in the room felt stale, like it had been sealed off from the world. Clothes were scattered in piles, drawers half open, a faint smell of her mother's perfume still clinging to the air. As she searched through the dresser, her hands brushed against an envelope tucked between a stack of old receipts. The flap wasn't fully closed, and across the front, written in Carla's sharp handwriting, were the words "Do not touch." Rhys froze. Every instinct told her to leave it alone, but curiosity and fear pushed her forward. She sat on the edge of the bed, opened the envelope, and pulled out a few printed pages. The first lines made her heart rate. They were emails, long exchanges between Carla and a man named Todd. As she read, her chest tightened. The messages were casual, filled with plans and laughter, and then one line stopped her cold. "Once we're in Florida, it'll finally be just us. No more stress, no more responsibility." Rhys's vision blurred. She flipped through the rest, hoping there was some misunderstanding. But every word made it worse. Carla wasn't missing. She hadn't been trapped, hurt, or delayed. She had left, intentionally. She had chosen a new life somewhere sunny, with someone new, far away from her children. The pieces started to fit together in the cruelest way. The silence, the empty fridge, the forgotten bills. It was all part of her leaving. Rhys felt her stomach twist as the realization sank in. Her mother hadn't just walked away. She had planned it. She had lied to her face, pretending it was a short trip while she packed up her own future without them. The betrayal burned through her chest, sharper than anything she had ever felt before. She had been used once again, trapped by guilt into taking care of the children so Carla could disappear without consequence. She sat there for a long time, clutching those pages in her hand. The words on the paper seemed to hum in the silence. Todd's name appeared again and again, with promises of beaches, a fresh start, and a life free of baggage. That single word hit hardest. To her mother, they weren't family, they were baggage. Her throat felt tight, and her eyes stung, but no tears came. There was no room left for sadness. All that remained was disbelief, and the hollow ache of being fooled by someone she had spent her whole life trying to forgive. Slowly, she folded the emails back into the envelope and set it on the dresser. The truth was in her hands now, and there was no going back. Her mother hadn't vanished, she had abandoned them, and Rhys was the one left to pick up what was left behind. The truth sat heavy in her chest long after she found those pages. That night, Rhys sat on the edge of her bed, her hands shaking as the memories came rushing back. Every word her mother had ever used to make her feel small echoed in her mind. Every guilt trip, every time she'd been told she wasn't enough unless she sacrificed something. The weight of it all pressed against her like a storm she couldn't escape. Tears came fast and hard. She tried to hold them back, but years of hurt poured out at once. The betrayal wasn't just about being left behind. It was about realizing that every time she had tried to earn her mother's love, it had never been real. She saw now how many times she'd been manipulated into believing that love meant obedience, that care meant debt. All those moments when she'd given up her own needs just to keep the peace, they came crashing down around her. But when the sobs finally stopped, something shifted. She looked around at the small apartment, at the blanket fort where Landon and Mara slept, and felt a surge of determination. Her mother's choices had always dictated her life, but that ended now. She wasn't going to let Carla's selfishness destroy what was left of their family. If her mom had walked away, Rhys would build something stronger from the pieces. The first step was facing reality. She picked up the phone and called her landlord, her voice trembling as she explained what happened. She promised she would find a way to pay what she owed, that she just needed time. The man on the line sighed but agreed to give her a short extension. It wasn't much, but it was enough to breathe. When she hung up, she dialed another number, Child Services. Her hands were cold as she spoke, explaining the situation in a calm, steady tone. She told them she didn't want to give the children up, only to make sure everything was done legally. She wanted them safe, wanted them to stay together. The woman on the other end listened carefully and told her she had options, that they could help her apply for temporary guardianship until her mother's whereabouts were confirmed. Rhys ended the call and sat quietly for a while, the room dim except for the glow from a small lamp. She felt emptied out, but there was a strange strength in that emptiness. She wasn't powerless anymore. For the first time, her actions weren't about pleasing someone else. They were about protecting the only people who truly mattered. When she finally checked on the kids, both were asleep, faces peaceful for the first time in days. She tucked the blankets around them and whispered a promise she meant with everything in her. "You're safe. I've got you." And for the first time since her mother disappeared, she actually believed it. A full week passed before the phone finally rang. Rhys was washing dishes, the sound of the water filling the silence when her cell buzzed across the counter. The name on the screen made her heart jolt. For a moment she froze, torn between anger and relief. Her hands trembled as she answered. Her mother's voice came through smooth and measured. the same tone she always used when she wanted to take control. She said things had gotten complicated, that she was sorry for the confusion. The words sounded rehearsed, too calm, like someone trying to clean up a mess without admitting they made it. She talked about unexpected plans, about needing time, and Reese listened in silence, jaw tight. When the pause came, Reese spoke clearly, each word steady. She told her mother that she had contacted the proper authorities and taken legal steps to keep Landon and Mara safe. She explained that she'd filed for temporary guardianship, so no one could take the children without going through the court. There was no anger in her voice, only quiet resolve. The reaction was instant. Carla's calm tone cracked into shouting. She accused Reese of betrayal, of turning her own mother into the system. Her voice rose higher with every word, calling her ungrateful and cruel. She demanded her children back, saying they belonged with her, that Reese had no right to make those decisions. Reese stood by the window, phone pressed to her ear, staring out at the fading afternoon light. She could feel her heart pounding, but she refused to let the fear win this time. She told her mother that she had been gone for too long, that no responsible parent disappeared without contact or support. She reminded her of the bills, the empty cupboards, the silence. There was nothing to argue with, just facts. Carla tried to shift the blame, twisting the story, saying Reese had exaggerated, that she hadn't meant for things to go this way. But her voice wavered. For the first time, it didn't sound powerful, it sounded cornered. When her mother realized Reese wasn't breaking, her tone turned cold. "You'll regret this," she hissed before hanging up. The line went dead, and Reese stood there for a long time, the hum of the refrigerator filling the room again. Her hands were shaking, but she wasn't scared anymore. She'd spent her entire life backing down to keep the peace, but now she felt something different, freedom. She set the phone on the counter and took a slow breath. The kids were playing quietly in the living room, unaware of the storm that had just passed through their world. For the first time, Reese didn't feel trapped in her mother's chaos. She felt certain. The shouting, the manipulation, it was the same pattern as always, but this time it didn't work. As the sun dipped below the window, she knew something had shifted forever. She wasn't the daughter begging for approval anymore. She was the one protecting what mattered, no matter who stood against her. The days that followed were filled with phone calls, visits, and questions. Caseworkers came by the apartment to see how the kids were doing. They looked through papers, asked about the routines, and spoke softly with Landon and Mara. Every time they left, Reese felt a little more drained, but she stayed steady. She answered everything honestly, showing the records, the emails, and the details that proved her mother had walked away without warning. After a few weeks, an investigator reached out with an update. They had looked deeper into her mother's past and found things Reese never knew. There had been several reports filed over the years, claims of neglect that had been closed quietly because Carla always managed to talk her way out. This time, though, the evidence was clear. There was no more pretending. The report confirmed what Reese already understood in her heart. Her mother wasn't coming back to fix things. She had been running from them. When the decision finally came, Child Services informed Reese that the guardianship would remain with her for the foreseeable future. The relief that came with those words was unlike anything she'd ever felt. For once, someone official saw the truth. Someone finally believed her. The tension that had built in her chest for weeks began to ease, replaced with a quiet strength that she hadn't known she had. Not long after that, word spread. Todd, the man her mother had run off with, had left her. He wanted nothing to do with the investigation or the drama that followed. It was a small piece of information, but hearing it brought a strange sense of closure. The life her mother had chosen over her own children was already falling apart. Then one evening, there was a knock at the door. Reese froze when she heard the familiar voice calling her name from the hallway. Her mother sounded different, hoarse, desperate, crying. For a moment, Reese stood there, her hand hovering near the handle. Part of her wanted to open it, to see the face she'd loved for so long. But another part, the one that had grown stronger through the pain, whispered no. She took a step back, her heart pounding, and listened to the muffled voice outside. Carla kept knocking, her words tumbling out between sobs, pleading, apologizing, promising change. Reese stayed quiet, watching the door without moving. Every cry sounded like the same manipulation wrapped in a different tone. The tears didn't match the choices she had made. Minutes passed before the knocking stopped. The hallway fell silent again. Reese turned the lock firmly, sealing the door with finality. The apartment felt still, but not empty. Behind her, the children were in the next room, safe and unaware. She walked over, checked on them, and sat for a moment in the soft glow of the lamp. The moment was small, but it marked a shift she could feel deep inside. For the first time, she hadn't given in. She hadn't bent to guilt or fear. She had chosen peace over chaos, and as she sat in that quiet apartment, she knew she would never open that door again. Life began to take on a rhythm that finally felt real. Mornings started with packed lunches and sleepy smiles, afternoons filled with homework at the kitchen table, and evenings softened by laughter that didn't feel forced. The apartment, once quiet and tense, started to sound like a home. Reese worked hard to make sure Landon and Mara had what they needed: clean clothes, full plates, and the kind of peace that had been missing from their childhood. It wasn't easy. She balanced long hours at work with school meetings, doctor appointments, and the endless tasks that came with caring for two young kids. But with every small success, she felt something powerful growing inside her. The chaos her mother left behind was being replaced by structure and love. Bills were paid on time, meals were shared without fear, and laughter echoed in corners that used to hold silence. That became her quiet form of revenge. She didn't waste her days waiting for an apology that would never come. Instead, she poured her energy into the simple act of living well. Every good report card, every drawing stuck to the fridge, every evening when the kids fell asleep feeling safe, it all reminded her that she had turned pain into something beautiful. She didn't need to shout, didn't need to prove anything. The proof was in the stability they finally had. Months passed before her mother's number appeared again. Reese stared at the screen, her stomach tightening. Against her better judgment, she answered. The voice on the other end was familiar but weaker, trembling. Carla spoke quickly, saying she needed help, that things hadn't worked out, that she didn't have anyone else to turn to. She cried about losing Todd, about the investigation ruining her life, about wanting her family back. Reese listened without interrupting. Each word felt like an echo of the past, the same pattern of guilt wrapped in desperation. But this time, she didn't feel small. She didn't feel trapped. When the crying turned to pleading, she finally spoke, her tone steady but calm. "You taught me what not to be," she said simply. There was nothing else to add. The silence that followed was thick. Carla tried to speak again, but Reese had already made her decision. She didn't argue, didn't explain. She ended the call, knowing she owed nothing more. There was no satisfaction in her choice, only peace. The kind that comes when you stop carrying someone else's mistakes. That night, she sat on the couch as the kids played nearby. The weight that had lived in her chest for years was gone. She looked around the small, warm apartment and realized she didn't need revenge in the way she once thought. Her victory was right there in front of her. 2 happy children, a calm home, and a version of herself her mother could never break again. Months turned into a quiet rhythm that finally felt steady. Reese had worked tirelessly, picking up extra shifts and saving every spare dollar. Eventually, she managed to move into a larger apartment with enough space for the kids to have their own room. The new place felt bright and open, a stark contrast to the cramped uncertainty they had lived through before. It was a space where laughter could fill the corners without fear, where every day felt like a fresh start. Her work life had shifted too. She found a better job that recognized her dedication and offered stability she hadn't imagined possible. The stress that had once clawed at her chest eased gradually, replaced with a confidence she had never known she could have. Each morning, she woke knowing that she was providing for Landon and Mara in a way her mother had never managed. Little moments began to surprise her. Mara, while playing with her toys, called Reese Mom by mistake. Landon, while asking a question about homework, slipped the word in too. At first, she froze, unsure if she should correct them. But then she smiled quietly, letting the words linger. Pride swelled inside her. Not the pride of vengeance, but the quiet, steady pride of someone who had built a life that could withstand betrayal. Reese often thought about her mother, about the choices that had left her alone with 2 children and a mountain of responsibility. The anger and hurt still lingered at times, but they no longer controlled her. What had once crushed her had forged a strength she didn't know she possessed. Every decision she made now, every small victory, was a testament to that resilience. Sitting on the couch one evening while Landon and Mara laughed over a shared joke, she realized something important. Revenge wasn't about confrontation or punishment. It wasn't about making her mother feel the pain she had felt. True revenge, in its quietest form, was building a life free from manipulation and fear, a life where the cycle ended with. By protecting her siblings and creating stability, she had rewritten their story, proving that growth and love could outlast betrayal. As she tucked the kids into bed that night, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The apartment was warm, the children safe, and the future uncertain but promising. Reese knew she had emerged stronger, capable of facing whatever came next. In the end, she understood that the real victory was not in payback. It was in breaking the pattern and choosing a better path for herself and the children she loved. Hey besties, thanks for sticking with me till the end. Reese's mom abandoned her and the kids, but instead of breaking, she built a safe, loving home, worked hard, and gave Landon and Mara stability. Even when betrayal cut deep, Reese turned pain into strength. True revenge wasn't hurting anyone, it was thriving. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe for more. See you next time.